Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here today for this very important event. I'd also like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and that we acknowledge their spiritual relationship with their country. Well, this is indeed the launch of the Building a State of Wellbeing, a Strategy for South Australia, the final report of our Adelaide Thinker-in-Residence, Professor Martin Seligman. In a way, wellbeing is the ultimate goal of all that public policy is directed to. And so, in a fundamental way, it's really what all of our efforts are directed at. And so to choose that as the objective of public policy really just allows us to collapse everything that we seek to do, whether it's about our health services, our education services, our law and order services, all of the aesthetic pleasures we get from our sporting and cultural pursuits, all collapses down into one simple idea. So it's wonderful today that we've chosen this as such a clear-sighted and obvious objective for our endeavours. And in order to build this notion of a state of wellbeing in South Australia, we've identified the need to bring in the world-leading psychologist and expert advisor on wellbeing. And that's what we have in Professor Seligman as our 22nd Thinker-in-Residence. And anybody that's listened to Professor Seligman, I think, has been struck by how inspirational his message is. And it's an incredibly liberating message, and one that I think is going to unlock a lot of energy here in South Australia. And I think a testament to the strength of his message is the coalition of support that he's built in South Australia across such a broad range of institutions, public and private, across a range of disciplines in a way which I think is incredibly powerful. This report considers how positive psychology can improve the lives of everyday South Australians. The report explores the potential to use positive psychology in schools, workplaces, and across the whole of our community. Wellbeing should be considered as the principal measure through which we can understand the state of our economy and our society. Economic indicators just simply don't provide an adequate explanation as to the progress of our society. And we also know that positive mental health and wellbeing is fundamental to productive lives. So there's a massive interplay between the prosperity of our community and the health and wellbeing of our citizens. We also want every child in South Australia, every young person, to be resilient and confident citizens who are able to participate well in everyday life and in shaping the future of our state. I think any of us who have just contemplated the world as it exists now and what's been happening to it is struck by the incredible pace of change and obviously we've unlocked an enormous amount of prosperity. We've internationalised our economy, and we now have an enormous amount of energy and excitement that's been released through that process. But it's also raised the general level of stress and complexity of human existence. And for people that are seeking to grapple with this modern complex life where there just seems to be endless options and so many challenges, and a feeling that there is a need to change and keep up, otherwise you're going to be overwhelmed by a world that's changing more quickly. It is, I think, increasingly incumbent on us to protect and enhance our citizens' capacity to deal with that. And that's what this is all about. It's about ensuring that our citizens have the resilience and confidence to be able to grapple with the challenges of everyday life, so that they can actually see these things exciting and see them as opportunities to shape their future, rather than to be overwhelmed by these changes that are occurring in our society. So Professor Seligman's research indicates that it's not only possible to teach and to build wellbeing, but it's also possible to immunise young people against mental illness. Now, this is just such an exciting idea. The notion of being able to learn protective behaviours and ways of being which allow a young person to be able to survive in this fast-changing world. And isn't that the ambition that all of us have for our children? At one level, we don't want them to leave, but at another level, We're quite anxious for them to leave, actually. But at another level, when they do go out and they leave our home, you want them to be able to survive in the world. And so you want them simultaneously to be caring and loving, but you also want them to be tough and resilient, because we know that the world can be a challenging place. And so I think we're all struggling with this idea about how do we prepare our children to be resilient in the world. And I think this is such an exciting possibility, because one of the greatest challenges is not the physical harms that they may be exposed to, but the psychological and harms to their well-being associated with the world as it is now. And too often, I think in public policy, what we find is that we're reacting to emerging problems instead of addressing them at source. This is the other great challenge of public policy, the now versus the new. There are just so many imperatives which are usually characterised as the present-day crisis, whereas we know that to stand back, as the Thinker in Residence program gives us the opportunity to do, and understand the underlying causes of some of the things that are emerging as great issues, gives us the opportunity to make some changes that really stops that pipeline of problems and crises emerging. But the challenge for public policymakers is, how do you respond to present needs and find enough resources to make the changes necessary to actually address those needs? And I think what we've been given now by Mr. Seligman is a wonderful blueprint to allow us to make those changes. We also have a fantastic institution which provides a wonderful vehicle to allow this to be promoted, and I'm sure that Raymond Spencer will be saying something about this vehicle, the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, the SAHMRI. The mind and brain is one of the key research themes of SAHMRI, and I think that gives us a wonderful opportunity. But instead of our absolute focus being on addressing psychological or psychiatric illness, we should also be dedicating our energy to encouraging well-being. And to achieve our goal of building well-being in our children, we need an approach that includes as many of our principal social institutions as possible. And that's why it's so wonderful to see so many people represented here today from those institutions. We need schools where families are welcomed and partnerships are strong. We need school communities that include parents, teachers and students to value well-being as an end in itself, as well as a tool that supports effective learning. And it's wonderful to see Mount Barker High School and St Peter's College taking the lead as partners in this residency. The relevant departments have led their strong support to this endeavour, and the Catholic Schools Association have also been an important partner. Mount Barker High School has functioned as an activating hub for the wellbeing in the whole Mount Barker community, taking the wellbeing concepts beyond the school gates to the broader community. This, Dr. Seligman tells us, is a world first. If this concept of allowing wellbeing techniques within schools to pervade the whole community was applied across all schools in South Australia, it would represent a social revolution. St Peter's itself is now a world leader in this area of positive education and have contributed enormously to the success of this residency. Their systemic and evidence-based approach to the introduction of positive psychology in their school is groundbreaking, and it is attracting global attention. Headmaster Simon Murray and Director of Positive Education Dr Matthew White have just returned from 10 Downing Street, where they're invited to speak about the work they're undertaking in their school community. And this opportunity was organised by Dr David Halpern, Director of Behavioural Insights team at Downing Street. And this demonstrates the incredible global leadership shown by a South Australian school, and we're very proud of St Peter's for taking that decision. Professor Seligman, recognised as one of the founders of the science of positive psychology, has had experience at the highest level of international public policy. Many of us present today understand that the dominant prism through which public policy is viewed today does not yet embrace notions of positive psychology and well-being. But some influential actors in our public conversation also resist any incursion into wellbeing in the public policy debate. And so we have to resist that. I know it's very easy to make a cynical remark about wellbeing, to say that it's something which is airy-fairy and isn't backed up by solid science. But I am reminded about the words of George Bernard Shaw, who once said that every great truth begins as blasphemy. So we shouldn't be deterred from pursuing this goal. It's certainly something that I believe sits at the heart of my political philosophy, and indeed the political philosophy of my party. Many years ago, in 1949, former Prime Minister Ben Chifley gave a speech that really is regarded as the seminal construction of the Labor project. He called it the light on the hill. And he said in his speech these things. He described a movement that was not just about putting an extra sixpence into somebody's pocket, but about bringing something better to the people, better standards of living, greater happiness to the mass of the people. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, the notion of happiness. It's the simple, unadorned truth about what the objective is for this project. More of our citizens to be happy. Our government believes that bringing greater happiness and enhancing wellbeing is the fundamental project for government. And Professor Seligman has challenged us to become the first jurisdiction in the world to measure wellbeing and to embed its importance in our culture. And in his report, he suggests three principal strategies: positioning South Australia as a world-leading state of wellbeing, measuring wellbeing, and teaching and building and embedding wellbeing science in South Australia. And I'm happy to announce that our initial response is to dedicate $800,000 over the next 4 years to measure and build wellbeing in South Australian young people. We want to increase wellbeing and improve the resilience of our young people in order for them to cope in this challenging world. This funding will assist us to support Lake Windermere, Salisbury High School, Trinity College, Holy Family, Mount Oliphant College, John Hartley School, Swallowcliff Primary School, and to join Mount Barker High School as community wellbeing hubs. A pilot wellbeing research survey will be expanded to 175 schools. The SAMRI, Institute of Mind and Brain Theme, will undertake more research on the wellbeing of young people. Work will be undertaken with universities to increase the breadth and number of courses in positive psychology for teachers and other professionals. And the public, independent and Catholic education sectors will work together to drive wellbeing measurement in our schools. So the final report that I'm launching today is a summary of Professor Seligman's ideas, his proposition that South Australia could be the world's first state of wellbeing. The accompanying summary of progress outlines the significant work which is unfolding and evolving in South Australia, led by many different partners in the residency, and it's a compelling story. In his report, Professor Seligman has left us with more than a blueprint for action. He's suggested a paradigm shift in the way in which we see all public policy, not just mental health policy. It will have a transformational effect on South Australia, but it's not the end of Professor Seligman's ties with South Australia. And I'm delighted to announce that Mr Seligman will visit Adelaide again in February to conduct public lectures in Adelaide and the northern suburbs. He'll be joined by Brigadier General Rhonda Cornum, a decorated war hero in the Gulf War, who served as the first director of US Army's Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Initiative. This work will enhance our wellbeing. Begins now. We have the opportunity to embrace these concepts of positive emotion, engagements, relationship, meaning and accomplishment to build a more inclusive, more resilient, happier South Australia. So thank you, all of you, for your commitment, and I encourage you all to take a copy of this wonderful report and also the summary of the progress that we've made today. Thank you very much.